All right. I'm doing a bit of a mic check here. I think we are good to go as far as sound. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to flip over to the Jam Stream layout and we will kick off today's session. All right, I think we're good to go. I think what I'm going to do for the intro, since I tend to talk a little bit for these jam streams and kind of go over what I want to do and kind of my plans for the session, and that could take between 5 and 10 minutes. So rather than just have it be dead silence, I'm just going to put a real simple one track beat in the background and just drop the volume down. That way there's some background noise and it's not just empty. So let me see. Do something real simple. That should do for now. Hey, Core Breaks here. Core Break says, I'm going to right click your NFT. Well, I can't stop you, Core Break. But feel free to do so. I'm assuming you're responding to all of the talk on Twitter following the last stream with Wazzy. We like to meme on NFTs here. Hey, Lion Tamer's here. Lion Tamer says, Ayo, it's a 25-year-old beatboxing blueberry. Buddy, I wish I was 25 years old. Hey, Wazzy's here. Speak of the devil. How's it going, Wazzy? Welcome to the Jam Stream. Okay. Core Break says I'm turning 29 this May. I wish I was 15 again. 29's nothing. Oh, Iconic's here. Iconic says, hi, Raku. Can't stay sadly, but dropping by to host and to wish you a great jam session. Much love and take care. Thanks, Iconic. Appreciate you popping in as always. I hope your Saturday is going well. Lion Tamer says, Wazzy, say something nice to the beatboxing blueberry. Why am I a blueberry? Is there some lore that I don't know? Wazzy says, I sound better today. Did I sleep? I did sleep, and I did wake up more than an hour before stream and got a chance to consume nutrients. So I might be a little more awake than normal, but we should be good to go. Oh, Core Break says, I think it's the hair. Lion Tamer says, your hair is blue. Okay. If hair color dictates what fruit you're classified as, I guess that makes sense. The real question is, if Wazzy has brown hair, what kind of fruit would she be? How many brown fruits are there? I'll let chat decide that. The kiwi. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Kiwi. Lion Tamer says, I'd be an old lemon because I'm a dirty blonde. Does that mean you could change your fruit type if you just dye your hair? These are the questions that we ask. All right. Before I sort of explain what I want to work on today, are you folks able to hear me all right? I'm assuming since you're responding to me in chat, you can hear me, but let me know if the sound levels are okay, and then once I start making beatbox noises, if I need to adjust any of the levels. I think everything is pretty much the same as it was last time we did one of these. Core Break says yes. Lion Tamer says I plan to become a cherry. Red hair. Okay. Looks like we got the green light from Wazzy. All right. So, what are we doing today? For those that might be new to the Beatbox Jam stream, since I've only done a couple of them here on Twitch, the point of these sessions is to serve as, one, practice sessions for me to force myself to do drills and practice basics and things like that, but also serve as a discussion for talking about beatboxing with folks who are interested in it or are new to beatboxing or just unfamiliar. I don't consider myself an instructor when it comes to beatboxing. I haven't been doing it that long. I've only been doing it for about 3 years, but I find it really interesting to talk through sound theory and the mechanics and techniques of how all the weird sounds and instruments from beatboxing are created, because there's a whole lot of nuance to technique and all sorts of neat things you can do with really simple ideas, and it's interesting to talk through that sort of in an informal lesson environment, and then also kind of experiment around with certain ideas in real time. So we have sort of what I consider beatbox technique, sound theory. We have practice drills, going through the repetition of how to get better at sounds, how to practice them. We have pattern construction, which is taking the sounds and putting them together to create sound sets. And then we have routine construction, which we've talked about a little. I don't know if we'll get too much today, but routine construction is taking all the patterns and everything and creating an actual song that is quote unquote performed when you are out there doing beatboxing in any sort of environment, by yourself, on a stage, in front of other people. And so, like I always tell folks who are tuning into these streams, if you ever have questions about anything I talk about or anything I do, or even if you just say, hey, you did that one weird snare 10 seconds ago, what was that? How'd you do it? Or what's it called? Just drop questions in chat. I have you folks right here on my side monitor. I can see everything you're saying, especially Wazzy. So feel free to stop me and let me know if you have questions on anything I'm doing or covering. And I did sort of structure a lesson plan about what I wanted to talk about today, but we always start the jam streams with warm-up. I will always stress the need to warm up when it comes to beatboxing stuff, because like anything else, I mentioned this last time, I'll mention it again, like any other type of quote-unquote performance, your ability to do things cold is limited in beatboxing, just like exercising, sports, playing other musical instruments, singing, just like all of those things. If you warm up, it'll be a lot easier to do things. And for beatboxing, it's face muscles, things like the lips, and then the voice for things like basses. That requires warm up, because I can do all the techniques that I know, but they come out a lot cleaner and more consistently if I've warmed up just a little bit, and it makes it a little bit easier for me to be able to do things, and it should sound better in theory, right? So let's turn this off. We'll clear off the simple little background loop we created. And I should probably put a hardware page on my channel, since I'm sure folks will ask eventually. But for my equipment that I'm using, the main piece of equipment that all the stuff for these jam streams and some of my other content that I use is what's called the RC505 loop station. And this thing functions like a sound interface input device, and it's a looping station or loop station, which we'll get to later. After we go through all of the lessons and stuff like that, then we'll actually be creating some BGM stuff again like we've done before. And that's when I'll be taking suggestions for things from you folks in chat and creating BGM tracks to use in other content. Corbreak says, I'm making lunch with this in the background. I gotta say I like your voice. Very soothing. Oh, thanks, Corbreak. I know I sometimes get told I sound sleepy or bored. I have a very naturally chill voice. And I try and find a middle ground for keeping at least the energy levels obvious enough, because I'm not a sleepy person unless I just don't sleep. But I also don't want to be like the exaggerated YouTuber, you know, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You guys would be able to tell if I was trying to do that, because it'd be very fake and phony. But hopefully this is good background music or background sound, and it should be interesting. Corebreak says, resting, chill voice. That's right. I'm like the living opposite of Wazi's default settings. She is very excitable normally. I am kind of the opposite. So let's start with some warm-ups. The way I structure warm-up drills in these jam streams is nothing really elaborate. Basically, it's going through just simple patterns and putting sounds together, and basically just doing simple things that are forcing all of the components that go into beatboxing to warm up. So you'll see me doing different lip-based sounds. Maybe I'll do bass stuff after, since I kind of structure it in sections. But basically just running through exercises to warm everything up, get the blood flowing, and get ready. See, Lion Tamer says, I would probably deter people away from any streams I would do because my voice is pretty low energy and monotone most of the time. Well, if you can find a way to make your content interesting outside of just your voice, everything that goes in the presentation also has to do with what you talk about and how you sort of communicate. You can have the most chill and low energy voice, but if you find a way to present your content in an interesting way and still be engaging, then I still think people would be drawn to it. It largely just depends on what you wanted to do. I wouldn't tell someone who thinks that they have a really monotone voice to not try and do content. I would say try and think about how to present what you care about in an interesting way, and then just work at it. I definitely am still working on being comfortable talking to a group via the internet. A lot of the stuff I do, most of the stuff I do is unscripted. So I got to think about how to do all the stuff off the top of my head and maintain a train of thought, so I'm not like a goldfish, you know, getting distracted by something, saying one thing and then all of a sudden, oh, let's talk about this and this, and jumping all over the place. I think people would find that hard to navigate. I'm gonna move the chat up on my other monitor. This is a vertical monitor, and because I'm standing up when I do these, the latest chats are at the bottom, and so I have to look all the way down. So I'm gonna move you folks up so I can actually see the latest things you're saying. Wazi said, it's a good voice to work to. Not gonna blast your ears out with a like and subscribe like 13-year-olds. Wazi says, I feel like this is a call out post. Nah, it's not a call out post. Everybody's different, and I think everybody has to work with what they got. Like I said, the main way to maintain any sort of viewership is to find a way to make what you're talking about interesting. And that's the challenge. All right. Let's run through some warm-ups. This will be a good sound check to make sure everything is good once I actually start making different noises. So I'm going to run through some basic patterns that I use like drills. And then from there, we will transition into the actual sound theory and technique part of today's discussion, which should be interesting to you folks, especially if you're musically inclined. So we'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, feel free to stop me if you have any questions or comments about what I'm doing. Lion Tamer says, Raku volume, Wazi volume. Corebreak says, I gotta say, Wazi, I'm pretty glad you rated this guy. I like Raku's content. Oh, thanks, Corebreak. We're just getting started, so you can reserve judgment till the end if you want. It's all right, let's warm up. switch. All right. Let me readjust my mic here. Wazzy says, true story. Raku and I met when a seagull stole his ice cream and he sadly beatboxed. Feel free to press X to doubt, chat. Let it be known that Wazzy and I live in geographically separate areas. Lion Tamer says, if I attempted that, everything would be covered in spit and drool. Interestingly enough, for beatboxing, and Lion Tamer says, plus I'd be dying for air. So that's definitely something to talk about, since it's kind of a work in progress for beatbox technique for everybody. Literally everybody who does it. And it has to do with air regulation and breathing control. And I'm not certainly an expert at it. I'm always trying to get better. But because so much of what you do is a combination of things going outwards from your mouth and nose in some cases, and inwards into your mouth and nose, the big trick is learning how to regulate what you're doing so that you're not passing out from lack of air, whatever it is you're doing. Well, as it says, Raku's going to sell Beatboxer mouthwater, $20 per jar. I'd consider it if there was a market. Not really, but sure. Kind of on the topic, like Lion Tamer is mentioning, when it comes to breathing, the simple act of breathing, there's a lot of things that go into technique for beatboxing that affect how you're regulating your air. It's not simply a matter of timing when you're breathing in versus out. Because I could be sitting here doing nothing but outwards techniques and break whatever it is I'm doing with a breath and have a hard stop. So if I was doing like, let's see, we'll use real active examples so I can illustrate what I'm talking about. Let's say I was doing a drum sequence that's kind of more, let's call it like drum and bass. So something that was just drum and bass with maybe a fill in between. So like a, and I was adding a fill at the end, so it'd be the way you would normally do that if you're trying to keep in time and rhythm would be to structure all of the stuff so that when you're done, then you take your breath, because there would be a natural pause. But beatbox technique is so flexible in that you can mix up other techniques in between that allow you to intake air before you have to do a full stop. And the challenge is figuring out how to place all that stuff in between one another so it sounds natural. So if we were to think about an example in the one I just demonstrated, we could add something like an inwards lip roll, maybe after the fill, to have a bass hit type sound. Wouldn't break up the actual melody, but it would allow you to get air. So an inward bass, or inward lip roll sounds like, So if we were thinking about the drum and bass thing, we could do something like, and then go into something like a tempo switch if you wanted to, and do something like, and doing all that means you don't have to stop for a breath, because the is breathing air in, and kind of a lot of air too, especially if you change the type of lip roll from a regular inwards lip roll to a sub bass, which is a little bit more loose and lower. It sounds like a big like 808 hit, and that sounds like, that takes in more air. So you could even change it to that if you have a breakdown or a tempo switch, and then you bring in a ton of air. Looking at chat, Corebreak says, doesn't Belle Delphine sell her bathwater, which is like you? She did. I don't think she sells it now. She sort of left the internet, but people bought it. It's like $10,000 a jar or whatever. Lion Tamer says, Wazzy is going to sell Arcanine Plush water $50 a jar to help pay off that questionable purchase. I think she's already paid for it with all of the generous donations from chat. Wazzy says, Raku, I got informative beatboxing time. Wazzy in chat, I got jokes. And Wazzy says to Lion Tamer, it was sad. You don't need to justify your purchase to us, Wazzy. We get it. And then Wazzy says, can you make noise while breathing in? Yeah, that's what I was demonstrating with the inward lip roll. So if we think about a sustained version of that particular instrument, the entire time you're hearing that noise is all breathing in. And there's another technique that is the sort of unicorn of my beatboxing career so far. That's a bass type that is breathing inwards, and we will see that in the future at some point when I'm good at it. But the short answer is, because of the variation in techniques in beatboxing, there's tons of ones that make sounds or some sort of noise while you're breathing inwards, in addition to all the ones that you make breathing outwards. A good example that's a little more simple than the inward lip roll would be an inwards case snare. Talking about the different types of snares that you can use in beatboxing, there's quite a few of them. There's many. But the inwards case snare sounds like a little sharp hit, pretty short, a little bit breathy. That's done inwards. I broke the technique down for it in some of the other streams, and I always encourage people to look up tutorials on how to learn it, because it's a little bit tricky. It's a tricky beginner sound that usually walls a lot of people when they're learning, but it's created by basically using suction with your tongue to seal your mouth airway so that you can't breathe in, and then you pop the back of your tongue down in order to get that sort of percussive hit, and you let the air go through. So the end result of the is that you're taking a really short, small breath of air in, but when structured in a beat, it allows you to get a little bit of air intake and regulate your air supply without having to stop and go and take a whole breath in, which is pretty handy. So if we were thinking about a sample beat for that, like a hip hop type beat, maybe something when every snare hit you're hearing there is a really short breath inwards. That's part of the actual snare technique. And so you could probably sustain a beat like that for a long time, a lot longer than you would if you were not having some sort of inward sound, because you're getting a little bit of air intake. I think if you look at the equalization, you're still expelling more than you're taking in, so eventually you would have to take a breath. But you could even mix up the overall flow of everything, so it's not just the snare. You might add an inwards drag or an inwards sucker punch drag, is a technique that I sort of coined for something I do. So instead of just you can add sort of the drags as a fill, and that would sound like And then the noises you're hearing is the actual drag, and that's an additional way to take air in. And what I was finding just doing that sample beat is I was taking in more air than I was expelling, and then I'd have to stop and breathe out. So the big challenge in beatboxing is figuring out a way to equalize what you're doing so that you're not having to stop and breathe or running out of air and passing out on your feet. Lion says, I feel like Wazzy would buy a giant Hisuian Arcanine plush if there was one, no matter how much it cost. That's probably true. Edward says, not to get political, but you know the Honey Drippers impeach the president drum break? I might know it if I heard it, but I don't know it just off the top of my head. Feel free to send it to me so I can listen to the rhythm, because I really don't know drum beats by their actual terms or their coined terms from songs. Like, I didn't know that the really, really common drum and bass-ish break beat was called the Amen break until I looked it up. But yeah, feel free to send it to me, Edward. That way I can see. Because drum rhythms are really interesting. I just don't know them by name. Wazzy says, what was your first beatbox? I'm assuming beatbox block. So the first thing that I got stuck on in beatboxing? That's a good question. Like I've told folks on stream before, I learned almost 100% from the internet. I have taken lessons from a pro, but that was a few sessions, and I'll probably be doing more in this next year. Everything else has been learning via YouTube tutorials. I think the first major block for me was lip rolls, because it was a sound I really wanted to learn, and it is very difficult to sort of mechanically figure out. You just have to experiment and get there over time, because the technique for doing lip rolls, which I'll break down here for folks listening, because it's sounds I use a lot, the mechanics aren't that difficult. Oh, I see Edward did send that to me right now. Let me get through this particular explanation, and then I'll play the sample. You guys will probably be able to hear it too, so we can all sort of think of the rhythm and get a feel for it. But lip rolls. Lip rolls are done using mouth pressure, so the bass dry lip roll doesn't use any breath in or out. And it's done in the corner of your mouth. You basically pick a side when you're learning, and it doesn't matter which. And think of it kind of like doing a kissy noise with your lips, kind of at the corner of your mouth instead of at the middle. And the way the lip roll works is you use that mouth suction to take that sort of kissy noise, and as you practice it and get muscle control over time, your ability to do it sort of changes. And the tricky thing is easily the position, because everybody's mouth is shaped differently. And then the end result, Core Break's got to take off. Core Break says, I got to go. This has been fun. Thanks for the content. Oh, no worries. Thanks for stopping by, Core Break. I hope this stuff was interesting. In case you want to see what we covered in the jam stream, the full archives will be on my YouTube channel. I always put the stream archives from here on Twitch over there, so that I don't have to worry about VODs expiring. So if you ever want to see what we talked about, then it'll be there. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. All right, so going back to lip rolls, using that mouth position and the suction or pressure in your mouth to sort of suck inwards from that corner, that sort of kissy noise goes from like a to a, which is my follower sound actually. And the dry lip roll sounds kind of like a bassy synth line. It's very distinct. Of all the beatbox sounds I learned, when I saw someone do that, that was the first one that made me think, how are they making that noise? That's very, very interesting, because we think of beatboxing as percussion noises, drum noises, and we'll get to basses later. But the lip roll is so unique and very useful in beats and just as a tool. That's what I really wanted to learn. And it took me a long time before someone explained it to me in a way that made sense. but it's kind of a brute force thing where you have to just take the position and practice it over and over again to get the lip strength, and then mess around with the position of your lips in order to figure out how to get the sound to hit. And that's what I wasn't getting. I thought everybody did it the same way with the same method, and I just was doing it wrong. Turns out you have to make adjustments based on your physiology, and it's just experimenting. But once you get it, once you get the, then it's just practicing the noise, learning how to get consistent with it, and then you can start doing all sorts of fun stuff with the lip roll. You can do things like an in and out dry lip roll, where you're pushing air out through that corner of your mouth while maintaining the position, and then doing the inwards one, or the regular dry one, back to back, and that would sound like, and that ends up being really good practice because it forces you to develop strength in that corner of your mouth just by doing that over and over again. And then you start learning how to do that faster, and it gives you a more interesting bass-ish type noise. And the faster you go, you start getting something that sounds like, and if you start going really fast, you get a really tight lip roll. I don't know what this technique has an official name because I haven't heard anybody really do it, but if you go super tight and super fast, then it sounds like, and it sounds like a really fast, rapid synth bass. I don't know what it's called. I need to ask a pro if there's a term for it because I've never seen it before. That's also really good drill practice just because it really forces your, I guess, your embouchure, that part of your lip for wind instrument players. It forces that to gain endurance because it'll make your face cramp if you do it for long enough. But I would say lip rolls, the inward and dry lip roll, to answer Wazzy's question, was my first major wall. And I sort of worked around it, but it took me probably a year until someone explained it in a way that made sense for me to get the sound. And once I got it, I was practicing it like crazy, I'll tell you what. All right, let's see if we can get the sound sample from what Edward sent me. It's probably not going to be super loud because I have the volume turned down a little bit. But let me drop my volume down and I'll turn up the sound on YouTube. You guys should be able to hear it better. Okay, so if we go back to the beginning, I also need to be careful about playing DMC music on stream. So that one's a pretty simple kind of hip-hop-ish beat, and it's got like an open-close hi-hat on it, so something like kind of something along those lines. Seems like a really iconic type of beat, something you hear in a lot of things in so different permutations. So to answer Edward's original question, yes, that break is very familiar because I've heard it replicated in a lot of things. And depending on how you wanted to create that, you could swap the snare out for different things. I don't know if a PF, the is the best one for that. You could do something like an outwards K, something like, that's going to be a little more like a rim shot-ish type noise. So I think I'd probably go PF on that one if I was going to create the beat sort of one for one. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. I would like to be able to get better with things like different time signatures and really funky meter in beatboxing. I'm not good at it. I understand timing signatures, but translating the time signatures of beats to actual beatboxing is not something I'm super good at. I need to train more with the metronome to sort of get that, doing things like 3/4 or 6/8. Because you could do some really neat stuff with beatboxing with unusual time signatures, but it takes a lot of practice because it's a little bit unconventional compared to just a standard 4/4 type beat. So let me change my caption real quick. I'll get my keyboard. We are moving into kind of the sound theory and discussion part of the session. Let's call it sound theory. And so we talked a little bit about the techniques and the idea of air regulation. And Wazzy had a really good question about sort of learning different sounds and working through blocks, challenges when it comes to how to break down different techniques in beatboxing. And I would always say, if let's say you're a brand new beatboxer and you're trying to learn via YouTube tutorials, which is a very helpful way to do it. It's the way I learned. And you're trying to learn a sound, kind of like me with lip rolls, and you cannot figure it out. You watch the tutorial 10 times and try and duplicate what the person on the screen is telling you to do, and you can't get the sound to come out. My recommendation is to track down other tutorials by other people for the same sound, because everybody explains it a little differently, and there's multiple different ways to get to the end result. And sometimes one way just doesn't work and you have to try another one. And my recommendation is to do as much research as possible and try everything until you get something that works. Because there's a good chance someone else ran into the same block that you did and they figured it out a certain way, and that way will work for you. You just have to find it. Let's see. Walsey says, if you could beatbox collab with anyone, who would it be? For talking about like an active beatboxing, like a kind of like a team type routine. Well, I do know a pro beatboxer. I would definitely be down to collab with him, but I don't know if he would ever do something with a VTuber. But Kendo from the States would be someone that I know, and he's a really chill guy. So that'd be my answer there. Lion Tamer says, but that's just a theory, a sound theory. That's right. I'll be the beatboxing equivalent of Matt Pat. So let's see, breaking down sound theory and technique. So again, we talked about sort of learning hurdles and things towards figuring out how to sort of decipher and break down how sound works. We could talk about that all day, really. We talked about air regulation, things like equalizing how much air you're taking in versus putting out. Also very important. The other things I wanted to talk about related to sound theory actually had to do with bass. And I was originally going to call this bass study, but we'll just keep it under sound theory since it's under the overall umbrella. Last jam stream, a couple weeks ago, we talked a lot about technicality. And I didn't really want to spend much time on it today unless people have questions, since I talked for a long time last time about it. It's one of my favorite topics. So for the sake of the discussion today, I wanted to focus on something a little bit different, but something I'm really interested in that's very, very in-depth as far as possibilities and potential, and that's the idea of bass. Depending on what gets you into beatboxing, it sort of drives where you start learning, because the art form is so unique in that you could start from anywhere. You could want to learn how to make hip hop beats. You could want to learn electronic type beats, EDM, dubstep, and all that stuff. Or you could want to learn jazz type beats if you really wanted. It just depends on what you want to get out of beatboxing. That determines what you start learning. There's no mandated curriculum. If you're just learning on your own, it's whatever you want. And likewise, it's sort of driven by what you consume. Just to recap my origin story, I decided I want to learn beatboxing after seeing YouTube videos of people performing with modern techniques and seeing how crazy the techniques have evolved from way back in the 80s when it was a bit more simplified, and thinking, I want to be able to do that because it's reflective of music I like and music I'm interested in, so I want to learn how to do that. And that's why I wanted to start learning. But Bass specifically is sort of connected to that. If you are doing a hip hop type track that you want to learn how to do first, then you're going to probably start doing a lot of maybe throat basses or cleaner basses and supplementing that with different hip hop type rhythms or something like trap if you want to do trap music. If you wanted to do the more electronic route and you wanted to do like a dubstep sort of track towards learning, because that's your favorite genre of music, for example, then you're going to probably go for more heavy, high impact basses, and you're going to want to learn those techniques first. It just depends. I recommend that people sort of start with the basics of beatboxing and not jump into the advanced stuff, because it's much harder to do and learn if you don't have a good foundation of the basic elements. But really, it's your choice. And so as part of the ongoing discussion and things on the jam streams, this week I wanted to do sort of a recap of the bass studies we've done in previous streams, going all the way back to YouTube before I started here on Twitch. And I want to do that by breaking down the major types of basses for folks who might be newer, and also explain the technique, the application, how they work, and sort of how they slot into my general instrument repertoire when it comes to beatboxing. And the best place to start with basses is probably the non-vocalized ones first. So if we think about the vocalized ones as anything that uses your voice, vocal cords, and that projects a sound, we'll move that into category 2, and we'll do that second. For the first class that I'll focus on, non-vocalized ones, the easiest one and first bass I learned is lip oscillations. And lip oscillations sounds like a kind of more tight and controlled flapping of your lips. You heard me doing it in the warm-ups. And lip bass sounds like... And it's pretty simple. I'll break down how it works in case anyone is curious and learning. But this is the first one I sort of learned because it's one of the more elementary sounds that people teach, because literally anybody can do it. And so to break down what we've talked about, it was a while ago, so that's why I'm recapping here. Lip oscillations are done by starting with what's called horse lips. So if you just take your lips, put them together, and then just blow air out of them, let them flap really loosely. Everyone's done it at some point, I guarantee you. And it just sounds like, you know, if you had a long day or you're just tired and just let your lips flap like that, that's horse lips. Lip oscillations take that particular technique and you tighten the corners of your mouth and force the sound to come from the middle of your lips and make it tighter and more controlled. And so instead of it tightens up and becomes, so horse lips, lip oscillations. Lion says, "Hey Wazzy, may I use your name for a character in Earthbound?" We'll see if she answers. I still need to play that. It's one of the SNES era RPGs I haven't played. So lip oscillations, we can call them sort of more controlled horse lips, and that's how you're getting the... And what's kind of neat about how this type of quote-unquote bass sound works is the pitch and variation in sound primarily comes from how tight or loose you keep your lips in that position. Again, you keep the corners tight to maintain that type of sound and not have it go back into horse lips, but you can tighten and loosen to a degree just from the middle of your mouth, and it changes how high or low that sort of oscillating pitch is. And so you might have some low that sounds like, and then you tighten it up and you might get something like, pretty subtle. It's not a huge jump in note steps, but you can even change the tightness of your lips and drop your jaw from the inside of your mouth to get a descending or ascending note in the lip oscillations. And that's how you get something that sounds like, and that's just keeping the same mouth pressure and then dropping my jaw and opening my mouth up. And that's how you're getting the... You can go down to up to down, and you're changing the pitch really simply just by changing the amount of space in your mouth. Lion Tamer says, starting at my first playthrough of it on Switch because it always interested me as a kid. I never had an NES since I was born in 2000. All I know about Earthbound is that its music is really cool. That game has a really neat, funky soundtrack. So I'm sure you'll enjoy it. It's a classic. I just haven't played it. So talking about lip oscillations, in addition to just changing the pitch of the oscillation itself by using mouth positioning, you can also vocalize it, which is a really handy technique to pair with a lot of sounds in beatboxing. And it's just the act of adding your voice, not necessarily forcefully, but just a hum or a singing tone from your throat, vocal cords. So taking the lip oscillation bass and you add vocalization behind it, it goes from to, and if you're really good at distinguishing notes and harmonizing, you can octave it and pair it so you're getting like a harmonized note. But the easiest way to just apply it would be, if you're doing the high to low, the adding your vocalization behind it gives it more of a melodic note, and it becomes, and it's just a matter of putting your voice out at the same time as doing the lip flappy noise. Lion Tamer says, there's one battle theme that mimics the original Batman theme. Is that the boss theme? I think I know the one you're talking about. Earthbound is a very quirky and interesting game. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. So the idea of vocalization of technique is going to be common in a lot of things we talk about. I'm not going to say every single one, but a good portion of sounds can be changed merely by adding your voice behind it. Very simple, doesn't require any sort of training to do. You just have to get used to making the sound from your voice at the same time as whatever it is you're doing. So for the first example in lip oscillations, that's one really common one. For non-vocalized or non-voice based sounds at their core, another one that I've talked about a couple times that I really should work on more because it's pretty interesting is tongue bass. And I touched on it once, and that might have been the only time I've talked about it. So we'll recap it here again for folks. Tongue bass involves rolling your tongue. And I've always said that if you speak a language like Spanish where you roll your tongue, it's a lot more of a natural type of sound to make because you've been used to doing it. But I don't speak a language that does that. In fact, I only speak English. Some Japanese, but mostly English is my first language. And there's no real natural rolling of R's in English, but the sound is created by basically flapping air over your tongue and causing your tongue itself to oscillate. Similar theory to the lip one, but it's with your tongue. And if you're doing it just in regular speech, it might sound like that. You roll your R's. I know some people can't do it. It has to do with physiology a little, but the idea of rolling your tongue is how tongue bass works. So instead of having a vocalization behind it in its default state, tongue bass sounds like, and it's just breathing out while keeping the corners of your tongue sort of sealed and forcing the air to go through the middle as it's coming out. And that's how you're getting the. And the sound itself isn't too difficult once you know how to actually make the roll happen. And the basic one is sort of keeping like a smile position, your teeth open. And that's how you're getting that. But what's neat about tongue bass is, just like all the other ones, by changing the position of your mouth and the shape of your mouth and your lips, it changes how the sound comes out. And so just by going from like an open mouth smiling position to like an O or an oo position, it goes. That's doing like an O face, if you will. And it changes the way the sound works. And if you're doing something like a dubstep drop, you might change the position on the fly, so you're getting something that changes in texture, and that's how you're getting something like a and it's pretty fun, but admittedly it's not a bass I use super often. I probably should do it more. And like the lip oscillations, you can turn it into a vocalized bass just by adding your voice. And if you do that for the basic mouth position, you get which changes the texture. And then you combine the vocalization with changing the shape of your mouth, and you're getting something like, and it gives you another way to vary the sound and tailor it towards whatever it is you're doing in your sound construction. It's pretty handy and flexible. Again, I don't use it enough. I probably should work on getting better at it and slotting it into beats. But of the two non-vocalized basses, lip oscillations, tongue bass are the two that I usually think of. Next up, I did want to spend some time talking about the vocalized basses. I'm going to cover three big ones that I think are really popular right now and good starting points for people wanting to learn how to pair basses with other sounds in beatboxing. And the first one of the oldest of techniques, is throat bass. And throat bass is done outwards. All the basses I'm talking about here are going to be outwards, because I can't do inward bass. But it's done by forcing air through your vocal cords to create a textured sound. And the breakdown for throat bass to learn is a little bit tricky, because it's not a natural sort of motion that people do when they're talking or singing. But throat bass sounds like I'm doing it with sort of a closed lip filter, but if you just do it open mouth, it sounds like wow, 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 wow. And the one way I saw it described, because I can't remember how I learned it since it was way back at the beginning, but people have described using like a kind of grunt or like a cough to get that sort of resonance, because it's all done through your vocal cords, but it's sort of a tightening of your vocal cords and forcing the air through. Because if you just sing, you get like no distortion. But when you start forcing that tightness of your vocal cords, you get the distortion on it, which is how you're getting the and that's practice. I would say look up some tutorials for learning how to get the sound started for throat bass, and then it's just practice. Once you get the muscle control, it's just practicing it to get it clean. And that takes time, but throat bass is fun. You can use it in all sorts of beats to add that textured bass that's different from like a sung or like an electric string bass. And so to demonstrate, since I should probably be doing active examples for these, if you're using throat bass in a hip hop beat, you might do something like and the sort of vocal range throat bass covers tends to be middle to high, at least for me. I think it's going to be different from everyone who's learning, but it sort of depends on where your vocal or singing range goes as well. Lion says, so what you're saying is talk like that old lady from the chocolate episode of SpongeBob. I don't know what the old lady sounds like, but that's where the chocolate meme comes from, right? Sort of. It's hard to describe. I will say that something I noticed, because someone brought it to my attention on one of my old streams way back. It was a meme from TikTok of all places, and I did not spend time on TikTok, so it was news to me. But for anyone who consumes TikTok content, if you're familiar with the beans meme, I think they call it. I looked it up because I had no idea what the person was talking about when they asked me. Because I was working on bass stuff and they said, "Are you just doing the beans sound?" And I said, well, "What is that?" But I think the whole point of the meme, I looked it up and the way I understood it was people are just going, they would go like, yeah, Lion's got the beans. All right, I need to get some water. Yeah, that sound, that's throat bass. It's forcing that tightness of your vocal cords so that your voice is going through them as like a filter, and that's how you're getting the And the reason why I talked about vocal range is you can go high with it, with the I can't go super high with throat bass because my voice starts to break up when it gets towards the top of my singing range. But you could push it even higher. Let's see. You lose a little of the texture that way. But I tend to use kind of mid-range for throat bass. Edward says, I feel like it's been a while since you've made a BGM where you do the drums and bass at the same time. What do you mean exactly, Edward? If you're talking about the actual percussion and rhythm track on the loop station, we'll get to in a little bit. I'm kind of trying to break this up by hour 1 and hour 2-ish. But we can look at that. If you're talking about the percussion line, the percussion line usually is its own track, and then I put a bass line. I record it separately and I sync it up. If you're talking about putting the bass and the percussion in the same track, like if I were to just record and loop a beat that I'm creating here, like and then loop that, I could do that, but it's easier to manipulate if I make the beat and do the and then I do the bass separately, because then I can affect them both differently. I can apply effects to one or the other or both. And Edward says like Under the Ground. Yeah, Under the Ground is not a good example because I didn't record that one with a loop. I recorded each component of the beat and then I really messily edited together in a sound program. But we can experiment around with the idea of how we're structuring and layering things when we get to BGM. So hold that thought and we'll figure out some ideas. Sour Lad's here. Sour Lad says, hi, Raku. What's up, Sour? Welcome to the jam stream. Lion Tamer says, I can barely do the beans thing before my voice rasps out and becomes air. So if you think of, and I hate using memes to illustrate beatbox technique, but it really is relevant for throat bass. If you can get the vibration that gets the beans, even slightly, and you could feel where that throat position is, then what I recommend doing is starting with no distortion and then pushing your voice down until you're getting that distortion. So keep it clean first and go beans, and then push it down towards the end to get the distortion. So it sounds like beans, and get used to doing that and pushing it down. So you're going from a vocalized note to the distortion version, and then get used to doing that. And then once you can do that comfortably, then just do it that way from the beginning. So instead of going beans, you're doing it from the beginning, going beans, and then that's throat bass. And I guarantee if you actually practice it, it'll get better over time, because no one's throat bass sounds like mine when they first start. It's so unusual of a technique and vocal technique. Your voice isn't used to it, and your throat will get sore if you actively practice it, but it's endurance and muscle control and muscle memory over time. And the more you work at it, like every other sound in beatboxing, you guys will hear me say it ad nauseum, the more you practice, the better and cleaner you get at the technique, and it'll sort of evolve on its own. but it does take practice. So if you actively practice it, and you'll see that it will get better, but you can't expect it to sound like that out the gates. Edward says, so the meme is just people saying beans. Yeah, there's usually a WTF at the end of that, but the meme is, yeah, people literally just saying that, and I don't know why it's so funny to people. Lion says, I can't do low frequency when it just sounds like airy growling and not beans. Okay, so if that's the case, then your natural throat bass range might be a little bit higher, mid to higher. So if that's the case, and again, I'm only giving these suggestions if you want to experiment around with this idea and learn it. Let's say instead of like beans, getting that mid lower tone is more difficult. You can try and step it up a couple and go beans. That's harder for me personally, but I have kind of a naturally low voice. So you could do the same thing I talked about where you're going E, and you push that down in your vocal cords. If you think of throat position, you push it down a little bit and you get the distortion, and that's how you're getting them E, and you could try it that way. It sort of just depends on what's comfortable, and I don't know if using that particular meme is a good example of how to get the technique, but if you can sort of do it, you're halfway there. And again, it's very, very amusing to me that someone can equate a really established beatbox technique to a meme, because that's what people are doing in those videos you see on TikTok and whatever. They may not know that it's a beatbox sound because that type of distortion has existed for a while, but refining it into a bass is something that is a beatbox technique. So whether you know it or not, you've been exposed to a technique that exists. Sourlad says, Gen Z humor is just brain rot at this point. I have to agree to some extent, but I can't fully agree because that would make me a boomer. Just because I don't get something doesn't mean it's not valid humor. I might not like it and I might not understand it, but I'm not going to tell people that they can't think it's funny, because obviously they do. That's a futile battle. Wazzy says, oh no, Raku's going to make a TikTok? Nah. I have enough platforms to manage as it is between Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. I don't need another one. But Wazzy has a TikTok. At least she did at some point, because she posted that Fire Emblem video, which was very funny. Everyone go watch the video that Wazzy posted on Twitter. Lion says, Wazzy is alive. She can answer my question. Yeah, I have to go back up in the chat. But yes, now she can answer. I see Wazzy is upset that I'm plugging her stuff. I'm only plugging it because it was funny. Edward says, all right, I'll just say it. Gen Z isn't funny. I don't know. Like, it's just different. People said the same thing about Gen Y and the millennials. Back when, meme culture really took off. This is pre-TikTok, but like post actual coinage of the term meme. I know people that were around my age or older saying, I can't believe these millennials think these meme things are funny. They're not. Why would someone think a video clip of some guy singing "Never Gonna Give You Up" is funny? It's not funny. Well, joke's on them. It is funny. And the Rickroll is one of my favorite memes of all time. But it's just a generational thing. That's why I say I'm not going to tell Gen Z that their humor is not funny just because I don't think it is, because that would just make me a grandpa. I do think that part of Gen Z's culture of clout chasing is destructive, but that's outside of the humor aspect. That makes me a little more concerned, because Clout chasing is not a good mentality, especially when you're committing illegal acts for the sake of clout. And I don't think it's necessarily good for your future development and potential reputation to do things that are going to get you arrested for the sake of clicks and approval on the internet. But that is a topic for another stream. I'm not going to soapbox here while we're talking about funny mouth sounds. Sour Lad says, I never said it was never funny, just that it's mind-numbing. Oh, yeah, I get it. I've watched some of those TikTok meme compilations just to try and understand. And maybe I've chuckled at a couple of them. But in general, the whole experience was, like Sour Lad is saying, mind-numbing in that I just didn't get it. And that's fine. Hey, Red Dragon's here. What's up, Red Dragon? Welcome to the Jam stream. We sidebarred to talk about Gen Z humor. That is not the point of today's stream. So let's get back on track. Feel free to chime in about your opinions on Gen Z humor. Basses. We're continuing to talk about basses. I mean, we got sidebarred because we talked about beans. We talked about throat bass. Things like... The next one I wanted to touch on is sort of an evolved variant of throat bass, and that's vibration bass, one of my favorites. And vibration bass is done in a similar manner, but it's pushed lower into the throat, and you're actually letting your vocal cords resonate as opposed to being tight. Getting that tight sound is how you're getting the... and it sounds more filtered because I'm using lips closed as the sound's coming out. But vibration bass takes that and pushes it lower, and I use it for lower range bass sounds personally. So if I were to demonstrate, hopefully my voice isn't getting tired. If I take something like a throat bass and then drop it down a few registers, then that's how you're getting the vocal cord reverberation. And so it sounds like, and then dropping lower, it goes, and it sounds similar, but you get more distortion on the actual bass itself, which makes it a lot more punchy for things like drops. I like vibration bass a lot. It's one I practice quite a bit, and I really want to get super good at. But if we were to take vibration bass and slot it into a beat for demonstration purposes, you might get something like... Edward says, what da dog doing? That must be a meme reference. Red Dragon says, I just don't understand all the gen things. That's fine. I wouldn't spend too much brain power on it. Lion says, I shall stay stuck on the Earthbound naming screen until the day I die. Red Dragon says, wow, that is cool. Oh, thanks. Since you just jumped in, Red Dragon, we're talking about bass technique in beatboxing. And what I'm trying to explain and demonstrate is what's called vibration bass, which is like a throat bass, but lower in the actual vocal cords, so you're getting distortion on it. And like a low throat bass, if I were to kind of compare them side by side, about there, and vibration bass would be maybe a half step down in notation, but you're getting more of that rattly distortion. That's the vocal cords, and that's how you're getting the sorry for the voice crack. The more I talk and do these things, the more it's stressing my voice out, but we should be fine. I don't think I'll lose my voice while we're on stream today. But the way I learned vibration bass was taking the throat bass and just pushing it lower and relaxing my throat and just practicing over time. And I want to be able to do that type of distortion with lower notes, which is why I learned it. Red Dragon says, that just went over my head. Bottom line, making noises with your mouth, throat. You got skill. Oh, thanks, man. I'm mostly going over technique to sort of discuss how things are created. If people are interested in learning beatboxing, this is sort of kind of like your intro primer to what techniques are called, how they work. I'm not going to claim to be an expert on teaching because it's much easier to see an actual human mouth. And all of the tutorials to learn this stuff is on YouTube. That's how I learned myself. But this is meant to provide some insight into what I do when I'm on stream here making noises rather. Lion says, drink plenty of water. Yes. If you're going to be doing beatboxing stuff, have a large jug of water on hand because your mouth will dry out. Red Dragon says, well, I'm just too old. I'd be willing to bet you're not older than me, Red Dragon. It's all good. I am an ancient fossil on the internet. But that's okay. As long as we're having fun. So, talking about application of vibration bass, I did want to sort of demonstrate the distortion and sort of effects you can use in an actual kind of song setting instead of just explaining the techniques. So we talked about how to get the sound to come out, but if we were to actually play like a let's go dubstep because that's good for drops and illustrating in general, right? So if you're taking the and putting it into a drop, it might sound like and the distortion, the is just opening and closing my mouth and making breaks in the actual sound as it's coming out, and then that's how you're getting the variation in sound. Lion says, I think I just might name the girl Asia to get past the naming screen. Red Dragon says, oh, I'll take that bet. If I lose, I sub. All right. I'm 55. How old are you? You could just say higher or lower. You don't have to give me an actual number. I'm not trying to dox anybody here. Wazzy stares angrily. Just stop. The bees are angry. Oh, I see. Lion had asked Wazzy originally if she was cool with Lion putting her name as one of the characters in Earthbound. That was the question, Wazzy. It was way up in the chat, in case you didn't see it. But anyway, on the topic of employing bass, it's very challenging, but really fun to take mouth position and just figure out a way to break up sounds as they're coming out to create the different drops and whatnot. Red Dragon says, well, you have a sub. You sound great for a 55-year-old. Thanks, man. You can blame Earth registration for making me 35 when I got here in 2001. But that's okay. All right, I want to talk about one more vocalized bass before we move on to some pattern construction and some actual practice and then the BGM stuff. So the last one I want to talk about is what's called vocalized chest bass. And vocalized chest bass sounds different from the other two subtly. Its texture is a little bit different, and the way you employ it in beats can give a different tone. So vocalized chest sounds like whoa, 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 whoa. Sounds similar to throat bass and vibration, but it's less kind of messy in sound, a bit more melodic, and it doesn't put as much pressure on the vocal cords because it's not straining them. So you would create the sound by, I'll just break it down. Vocalized chest bass is done by doing a chest bass to start. So if you think of a really heavy sigh, just like a again, kind of like the lip oscillation thing we talked about earlier. Everybody has done this at some point when, you're upset or frustrated and you just had it and you just let all the air out through your mouth and kind of push the sound deep in your chest. That's where it comes from. And you get that rumble. You get the... If you aren't used to doing that often, might not get a huge like shaking rumble, but you can feel it. You can feel it in your chest if you just put your hand on your chest. So you start by doing chest bass, which is and vocalization is just adding a hum sung through your vocal cords, no distortion, just and combining it with the and you get whoa. So let me see if I can match the notes for consistency. We go, and you get, whoa. And basically you're taking your voice and you're pairing it with that rumble and then you're getting, whoa, 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 whoa. It's very unusual and interesting technique. It took me a bit to get it, but I thought it would be a lot more complicated, but it's just a matter of doing the and then singing at the same time. And that's how you're getting the whoa, 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 whoa. And taking that noise, you can pitch it downwards more and open your mouth up a little bit, and you can distort that vocalized chest bass and get more of a wow, 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 wow. Or you can even go higher with it and go whoa, 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 whoa. My voice is getting a little tired, so it's a bit difficult, but very versatile sound. And the way you close your mouth off determines how it sort of vibrates right at the end. And that's how you're getting the whoa. Sounds like a synth. Very handy. I do use it a lot. And that one's going to stress your throat out less than the others because you're just singing. Looking at the chat. Red Dragon says, I was thinking he was 28. If you're talking about me, then thank you. I'm not even doing my fake YouTuber like, comment, and subscribe voice. Red Dragon says, you have all these noises and I'm here with my normal and my demon voice. Well, if you're able to do a demon voice, chances are you're capable of doing one of the types of basses because all of the distortion that you apply to a regular human voice is, in some ways, how you do beatbox technique. So, you never know. It largely just depends. Watch, it says, don't eat bees. That's right. Don't eat bees. All right. Red Dragon says, bees aren't shiny, so I keep my coins. Fair. That's fair. All right. Let's do a little bit of pattern practice before we move on to Bgm stuff, since I think you folks might find that more interesting than me just sort of lecturing the whole time. Edward says, would you be able to sing in Exhosa? Exhosa? I don't know what that is, Edward. What do you mean? You may have to send me an example again. Red Dragon, you're making me want to try this all. Well, that's good. That's sort of the point of the jam streams. I'm not here to show off. I'm here to talk about beatboxing ideas and technique and give people an introduction, so if they want to learn, then they have sort of a jump off point to go and learn more. Like I said, Red Dragon, I learned how to beatbox specifically from YouTube. I didn't go to classes. I didn't study under a grandmaster. I learned from YouTube tutorials and starting from the ground up. Learning how to do kicks, hats, and snares. Literally just all of the basic elements of what you think a drum kit is. And once I learned that, I just started looking up tutorials for all the different sounds that I heard people use. Figured out, hey, that's what the sound's called. Let's find a tutorial and just learn it. Anyone can do it. The information is readily out there. Edward says it's the African tongue click language. We haven't really done much with clicks. Well, not today for sure. But chances are the combination of kicks and clops in beatboxing might be similar. I don't speak the African click language. But if we think of things like tongue clicks, really common in beatboxing, that's common. It's considered a snare, I think. You have clicks, you have clops, which is taking your tongue and smacking it on the floor of your mouth to get. And then you have hollow clops, which don't use the tongue pressure to smack your tongue down. It's just the actual muscle of smacking your tongue against the floor of your mouth, and you get. And by extension, the hollow clap is what I was doing. So it's really a matter of combining all that stuff. And you probably get something similar to those languages, but I'm not gonna try and pretend I know how they work. Red Dragon says, "Teach me Raku BPM Senpai." I'll do my best, man. If you have questions on what we're talking about in these jam sessions, like you've been doing, feel free to drop them in chat. I'll explain the best I can, or try and point you towards resources if you want to learn more. But before we go on to loop station stuff, we'll do some sort of freestyle practice and kind of employ everything we've learned up till now, or what I've talked about at least, so you can hear it in action, and then we will segue into the next session of the stream. So this is good practice for me to try and come up with ideas on the fly. So I'm going to try and just pull some stuff out of my butt, and if you folks have questions, just feel free to stop me. So let's see. I guess we can work on some basses before my voice completely dies today. Beans. Switch. Ooh, where my water at? Yeah, I saw what you sent me in Discord, Edward. I'll check it out later. On the topic of clicks. We'll have to put a pin in the idea of more EDM type stuff. Maybe we can try and create a beat in the Bgm brainstorming session later. Wazzy says, one day Raku's gonna yell switch, and instead of a different beat, it'll be like opera singing or something. Just start going into the bakamitai. Go from like a dubstep, like a switch. Dame da ne, dame yo, dame nano yo. Anta ga suki de, suki sugite. Yeah, reverb button. Ah, Red Dragon has a question. Red Dragon said that clapping sound, that you or a soundboard? I don't use soundboards when I'm doing straight up beatboxing freestyle stuff. My loop has a reverb button, which is how I did that just a second ago. But for the freestyle beat I was just messing around and noodling around with, none of that stuff uses a soundboard. It's all mouth instruments. So the snare you're talking about was most likely the BGM or spit snare. Is that the one you're talking about? If so, then yeah, that's not a snare I talked about earlier, but it's one I use a lot. It's super fun to use. So the way the BGM or spit snare works is you take your lips and put them close together, basically seal them, and then force air to come out of them and make it kind of a crackling noise. You know that noise that babies make? This is the example that I've heard. That sounds like... You hear babies make that noise every once in a while. BGM snare is that, but instead of just forcing the air out, cut it off in a burst. So instead of... Clamp your lips down after you get a little bit of air out, and it becomes... And I guarantee you, if you go through the motions, it's going to feel weird. It's going to make your lips tingle because it's not a usual position. But if you practice on getting that focused burst and just forcing the air out, then over time it becomes that sort of sharp clap type snare, and it's really fun to use. I love the BGM. It's perfect for like trap beats and pairing with things that are vocalized because it's just mouth pressure. You don't have to breathe. You're just forcing the air out of your mouth through your lips and getting that real tight type noise. You could do stuff like just hum through your nose while you're doing it, something like really handy because it doesn't use your lungs at all. Really neat technique. Again, BGM, like background music, or spit snare. It's a good question. Wazi says, I'm gonna art sad Raku. Not now, but it's on the list. Okay. Feel free. Edward says, BTK, TB, switch, Ave Maria. I wish I could sing opera. No, just wait. When we hit affiliate, the karaoke stream will be a chance for me to embarrass myself on stream in front of all of you people. But let's see. I think we'll go ahead and move on to BGM stuff. We're at an hour and a half. We've got about a little less than an hour left before I need to go run out the door. So let's talk about how the loop station works as a recap for folks who might be new. And we will get into some ideas for creating BGM tracks. And as a sort of preface, let me change my caption before I forget. We'll call this Bgm Brainstorming. So as a sort of intro to explain what we're doing here, again, my hardware is the Boss RC505 loop station. I have it hooked into my PC. All my sound for these types of streams comes through here. And it's set up as my sound device because I have a lot of control over the levels and parts of the sound, in addition to things like the reverb button. But when we have this part of the jam stream set up, the whole point is to come up with ideas for instrumental BGM tracks to use for other content on things like the chill streams, my tier list streams, usually when it's just me talking and I'm not playing a game or something else. I use these BGM tracks to just throw in the background just so there's some noise. And up to this point, I have sort of released 2 collections of BGM tracks that we've created here on stream and some that I've done offline, and put them up on my Bandcamp, which I don't plug my Bandcamp too much, but for fellow content creators out there that are watching this, if you want to use my BGM tracks for your content, then you can grab them for free off my Bandcamp and use them. They're royalty free. Now, I just asked that you mention me somewhere on your content, but they're out there in the world just to use as a resource. Lion Tamer says, I opened a present and got bread. My work here is done. Nothing wrong with bread. Bread is good. And so, with a place for all the BGM tracks to live, and now that I think about it, I do want to shout out Wazzy and the Toxic Cure team for featuring my BGM tracks on their streams. I noticed on Wazzy's intermission music, she has a couple of my older tracks looping with a little animated GIF of my face, which is very nice. I appreciate that. But like I extended to Wazzy, anyone can use my stuff in their content. Just give me a credit somewhere and we're all good. Wazzy says that sounded sarcastic. It's not sarcastic. I generally appreciate that you approached me and said, hey, can I use your stuff for content? And I said, sure, we'll negotiate the fee later. But being part of things like Extra Life and the intermission screen and everything was very flattering, especially since you used some of my older ones, which I think are kind of garbage. But like Wazzy, anyone else can use my BGM tracks for content. Feel free. Sour Lad says, I love the beeps and bops you made. Oh, thanks, Sour Lad. I am actively working on recording the next set. I was going to try and do it for today, but I've been busy all week. So I'm going to try and do it this weekend. And then I'll post something on Twitter and YouTube to showcase. If I finish a collection, then I'll put it on YouTube. But at the very least, I'll mention what I've done because there's a lot. I'm super behind on recording all the things we've created on Jam streams, probably at least 7 streams back. But I will get them recorded, and there is going to be a BGM Collection 2 coming out some point in this year, and there will be a Stream Sounds collection coming out this year. Stream Sounds are the beats that I create on non-Jam streams for background music. Things like drawing, primarily. I'll create loops on the fly. But the ones I think are noteworthy are going to go into the Stream Sounds collection. And so I'll let everybody know when that happens, and you can go check them out. But Wazzy says, open commissions for customs. I thought about that, but I am not a professional composer. Doing music commissions would be very difficult. When I get better at using the loop station to create music, maybe I'll open slots for that in the future. But for now, I don't feel like I could do that accurately yet. If someone said, hey, I want you to create a trance techno BGM loop for me, I probably couldn't do it. Not easily. And then it'd be a matter of sending versions back and forth and saying, is this what you want? They say, no, I want this instrument. I don't want to deal with that for commissions. I don't think it'd be worth their money anyway. Red Dragon says, OMG, a bee with blue hair and headphones emoji. I do want to create a space bee emoji or emote for when I hit affiliate. That's the one thing I still need to do. Right now I have a bunch of face emotes, but I do want to create one for space bees, since that's the name of all of you that choose to follow and tune in. My quote-unquote fan tag is the space bees. And I see a lot of bee emojis in chat. Very good. All right, let me get on my settings here. So let me demonstrate. I did this earlier on just to kind of create some background noise, but sorry, that's a spees. Wazzy says it's also on the cheerleader outfits. That's correct. Her icon for the space bees is a little more adorable than the one I created. So I may have to ask Wazzy for permission to just convert that into a stream emote. We'll see. Or I can create my own based on her design. We'll figure that out. But all right, let's demonstrate how the loop works. Basically, it's as simple as it sounds. I input something and I have 5 different tracks on this device. I can take those tracks, capture audio, and it'll loop it over and over again, and then I can overdub and layer on the same track. Walsey says, I'm a cutesy artist, it's not my fault. Well, that's good, because I'm not a cutesy artist. My specialty is creature and monster design. So, that's good. I'll have to rely on you then. Let me demonstrate real quick. If I capture a real simple beat, and this will be a good chance to test levels. Let's do something like capture that, and I'll explain how the looping works. All right. I also need to check my faders and make sure stuff's not peaking super high. You should be able to hear the drum line just sort of looping in the background. So I can take this line and I can overdub on top of it. Like, let's say I wanted to double up the snares. We've got PF snares, but let's say I wanted to add a sharper snare on top and do something like an outwards K in addition to the PF and overdub on top. So something like a, and do that, I just hit the button again and see if I can do it on the first try. It's a little bit hard to hear because it blends in. The overdubbing of the sharper snare blends in, but you can sort of hear that sharp hit that wasn't there before. And the way you can tell is if I take it off and then put it back on, very subtle. I guess doing a BGM would have been a more notable example, so I can try that. Oh boy, hopefully it doesn't peak too loud. So with the overdubbing, now you hear the clap, in addition to everything else, layered on top of the beat, and it's still on one track. Wazzy says, or Edward says, this beat reminds me of Stevie Wonder's Superstition. Yeah, it's got a similar tempo. It's missing that really iconic like harpsichordish bass line though. I wonder if I can duplicate that on the fly. It'd be something like yeah, something like that. I wonder if I can get that to loop. That's completely undistorted just because I did it with my voice with no additional effects. But this is being recorded on another track too, I might add. So now I have two. Red Dragon says, I think a custom background music for stream starting, be right back, and ending stream would sound great. Yeah, ultimately I wouldn't mind swapping out the songs for something I create. For now, I like the themes that I'm using. I have two video game songs for my loading screen that Wazzy animated, and then my outro screen that Pink drew for me. If I can come up with something that I like enough, then maybe I'll swap them later. But for now, I think those themes are a bit cleaner and a little more professional sounding. But yeah, good point, Red Dragon. Lion says, I think you're the second VTuber I've seen whose backstory involved bees. That's interesting, Lion. My actual canon lore backstory doesn't involve bees. It's just sort of a sort of a meme, and actually it was Wazzy. She's the one who mentioned it first. So it's become a running gag for my content, but I'm not actually a bee. I'm an alien. Not an alien bee, just a regular alien. What's this? Dragon is right. Wait, no, if he uses me, I'm gonna have to retime. I'm not too worried about the timing of like the animation with the track. Chances are I'd be able to manipulate the video to get it close, but that's not something I'm worried about. All right. So we've sort of demonstrated how the looping works. That bass line is really funny. But let's stop this. Wazzy is claiming to be innocent. You're the one who said that I was full of bees. I could probably dig up the tweet somewhere. It was a while back. But between that and that one fan art you made of me in a bee costume, that was entirely Wazzy's fault. But it's funny. And I think it's a good running gag. So we'll continue to run with it. Okay. So let's actually come up with some ideas for a BGM track. And I'm trying to think of a good genre and style to do. Let's see if we can do something a little more on the EDM side as opposed to the hip hop side, which I've been spending a lot of time working on for tracks. So let me see if I can do a basic kick line and then add in the snare and then maybe some hats. And then we'll come up with some ideas for adding in things like the bass line and everything else to sort of tie everything together. And let me see. Maybe I can demo something later to kind of show folks what the final product's going to be. But for this, let's just experiment around and see what we can come up with. So let's see. We could do something like... That's pretty good mid-tempo with a constant kick line. So let me see. Four. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, what would be a good snare to use in between? Go something sharp like an inwards K. Something like... Let's see if I can do that. I need to remember that I gave myself four hits with the drum. And then we can add a hat line in there too. All right, I'm going to leave that there for now. We can tweak it as necessary. This is everything on one track again. And one thing I can show off is the track level effects, which are specific instrument and effects that apply to everything that's currently looping, which is a really powerful function. And the one I like to use for things like setting up drops is beat repeat, which takes a section of the rhythm and cycles it over and over again. And you can change the speed and frequency of which the repeat happens. So if I turn it on at 50%, then we have something that's taking that short section of the rhythm and looping it over and over again. does not look like it'll let me go any higher without losing the rhythm completely. Without redoing it. This is up at 75%. That's a fun one. Now let's set up a bass line. I usually go rhythm, then bass, and then other assorted instruments or other effects that I want to apply to the track. So for the folks that are new, I'll show off the guitar to bass since that's the one I've used really frequently. We'll mess around with some potential bass lines, and then if we want to use another instrument, we can. So let me switch over that. What guitar to bass does is it takes all the input and it creates a string electric bass type sound. Easiest way to do that is just to hum into the mic, and then it'll create an actual bass sound out of that. Other sounds become really weird and distorted. Like you can't really use snares with guitar to bass, but if you just sing, then you can create your bass line that way. So I'm going to switch to the instrument. You folks won't be able to understand me anymore because it'll be distorted every time I talk, but I'm going to mess around with just a real simple bass line and show folks what it sounds like to actually loop the whole thing. So let's go guitar to bass. All right, jump back and put my dynamics back on. But now we have a bass line playing. Hopefully you folks can hear all the layers of the track. This is on 1 and 2. Edward says, maybe put more hats in between the ones playing. Yes, I was actually thinking about doing that on a separate track and doubling the hats, which hopefully doesn't screw up the rhythm too much. But right now we have quarter notes, just a... I was thinking about putting an 8th note hat run on another track, so it'd be... and making it separate so that when I do things like play with the track level effects, it messes with the different things differently, as opposed to lumping it all under the main one. So let me see if I can do that. All right, let me try and re-record that. Same basic idea though. Could even turn a little bit of reverb on. Let's see, is that audible? Maybe about there. I think I want to put the balance up a little bit in favor of that second hi-hat layer. So if we were thinking about how the beat would be quote-unquote performed using just these 3 simple tracks, it's simply a matter of just choosing when I want each thing to loop. And let's say I wanted to turn off the rhythm, the main rhythm rather. I just turn the track off. Put it back on. And now that we have 3 things to play with here, if I go into beat repeat and have it apply to all three of these things looping at once, it sounds like this is at 50%, getting eighth notes. We can drop it down to like half notes. That's why I mentioned you can use beat repeat to sort of set up drops, which is pretty fun. I don't know if it'll come into play on this particular track, but it is a neat function to have. You can try scatter too. We turn off effects on the bass line. Beat scatter is another effect, and what it does is it takes whatever you're applying that's looping, and it puts it through a preset pattern that it doesn't randomize per se, but it repatternizes the entire set of inputs that you're doing. At about 60%, that's how you're getting this weird sort of erratic variation on the rhythm, and that's just an on-off toggle. Normal. This is with scatter on. I use beat scatter a little bit less, but it is kind of neat for creating like an alternate version of the rhythm, and is pretty powerful, just like beat repeat. Really fun tool to use. What else we got? That's Vinyl Flick. I'm still trying to figure out how to use that one. It functions kind of like a record scratch, but it doesn't just stop. It basically slows everything down to a set point and then it lets it go again. So it's like pulling a record back and then letting it run forward again. I haven't quite figured out how to use it. It's a neat feature though. Like you can kind of scratch with it, but because it's not a static sound, it's actual movement. That's why you can't just cut like you can on a record. And maybe there's a way to customize the settings on this particular effect to make it like a scratch, but I haven't figured out how to do it yet. I like how I said I wanted to do like a more EDM type sound, something maybe more faster speed, but based on this combination of tracks, it's kind of more of a more down-tempo trip-hop type sound, which I guess is okay. Not necessarily what I was going for, but I think we can definitely do something with this. Like really, let me stop. Loops. Let's save this. I could up the BPM tempo and make it faster, and then it would become like a dance type song. If we do that. This is up to 185 BPM. Actually, I think it becomes more hip hop if I do that. Probably because of the higher speed. Let's do this. If I reload the track, messing around with applying the actual track level effects to just the rhythm and the hats, and leaving the bass unaffected, which is why it sounds like that. But let's see what else we can sort of add as a layer to this 3-track BGM. I think just based on looking at the time here, I'm going to be able to sort of mess around with this particular loop, and we'll see what other ideas we can sort of roll into this particular track, and this will be the only one we create for today. I hadn't expected to spend so much time talking about sound theory and technique, but it was a really good conversation, so that's perfectly fine. Let's see if we can get a synth on here. That's one thing we haven't really done a whole lot of. So let's see. I think I'm going to need to go for input, track A for synth. But what I can do is sort of demonstrate what that sounds like. It's a completely different instrument than we've seen so far. Turn this on. Alright, I'm off dynamics here, so I'm going to need to speak a little bit louder since dynamics is my mic boost. But synth takes all the input and turns it into exactly what it sounds like, a synth. So if I just make vocalized noises into the mic and turn it on, it sounds like meow, 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 meow. And I think it'd be kind of cool to create kind of a complementary synth line that goes along with the bass line, maybe up a higher octave like I'm trying to do here, and then putting a delay on it so that it's not just a arrow, it actually echoes. So I'm going to turn it on and then mess around with it and see if we can come up with something good. Meow, 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 meow. Meow, 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 meow. Wazzy says robot farts. Yeah, that's right. I'm messing around with the settings on the actual synth to see how much I need to actually sing into the mic to get it to actually pick up that arrow, arrow, arrow noise, because I want it to sort of echo. That's why I have delay on too. Meow, 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 meow. Meow, 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 meow. 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 Edwards says, try doing quick yells or something, yeah, it's a little bit finicky about how it's picking up the input. That's why I was messing around with it a little bit. I wanted it to be a bit more forceful for the first hit and then have it reverberate, but for some reason it's not picking up. And I don't know the synth preset super well, that's why I'm experimenting with it here. But let me see if I can affect the way it's hitting by changing its settings. So I'm going to turn it back on and just make random noises, and we'll see if I can get something I want. Well, I found out that if you do a click sound into it, you get that weird chirping noise, and that's definitely not what we want. Let me take a look at some of the other instruments and see if we can find something that'll be a little easier to use. The point of doing these brainstorming sessions is also for me to experiment around with commands on the loop station that would be different from what I'm kind of familiar with using. So let's see what else we have at our disposal here.
This one.
That's ring modulator, which I've used before. I wonder if like trying to do a robot voice that matches pitch with the bass would be something interesting. Because I've done sort of a looped distortion, just random noises using this filter or this effect, but I've never tried to actually do specific notes. I wonder how that would turn out.
Let's see.
Well, that's kind of an interesting effect that I don't think I've ever used quite like that before. Basically, it's combining the ring modulator, which is what creates the robot voice, with a delay. That's why you're getting that kind of reverberating echo coming after, because it's like an auditory delay, like an echo. I think we could do something with that. I just need to get the notes right. The notes there were not really in sync with the bass line. I was just seeing what I could do by switching the knob in intensity going up and down. So let's see. I'm going to try again and see if I can get something that's a little more in line with the bass, and then we'll see if we can get it to work. All right, let me turn my dynamics back on. So creating the combination of ring modulator and delay and using it as a quick section that loops instead of something that's more drawn out creates what sounds like an alarm, which is kind of an interesting effect because, again, I don't think I've done something that quite sounds like that. If we turn everything else off, this is all just done with my voice using the two instrument effects on the input, and it's kind of funny. I don't know if I like the tone or the notes it's using, but I like the effect. This is what you hear when you wake up every morning. But I think that's got potential, so I'm gonna leave that there for now. If we turn everything back on. And using a really easy toggle that's just the reversing the loop. If I turn it on, then it flips the whole note structure around, so this is what the alarm thing sounds like in reverse. And you can flip back and forth. If you create something that you want to reverse and unreverse and, you know, switch back and forth, you can literally put your thing down, flip it, and reverse it, which is neat because it's just a toggle. I may have to go and redo the bass line at some point. We're gonna save this as a prototype for today's stream because I need to wrap up soon. But the combination of instruments and tracks is fine, but I'm pretty sure the bass line I'm using, that really simple thing, I've used on my other beats before, and I don't want to really duplicate them. So what I may do, we have another one that was a work in progress we need to come back to as well. Next time we have a jam stream, I want to bring up these work in progress ones, and we'll just resume and keep working with them because I'm not going to get through all my recordings up to this point anyway. So we can keep this one and the last stream, there's a different one, and we can return to them and keep working on them and then sort of figure out where we're going to land on these. I kind of like the idea of the alarm though. Maybe if I keep that and then change the notes on the bass. Let's see, we can just do this. Let's see. Reverse it, stop. Start from the top. Interesting when you reverse it, because the pause is on the back end of that bass track, flipping it around obviously puts the pause on the front, and so you have like a delayed section of rests before the bass comes in. We'll have to think up a name for this one too. Again, this is a prototype and not necessarily the final version. But another thing I like to do when we're on stream working on these BGM tracks is give chat the opportunity to name what we're working on. So if you folks have an idea for a name that you want for this track, then I'll just dig through the archives and find it whenever we do the final and make sure I title it appropriately. I think something related to the alarm track would be appropriate here. But before we start winding down and wrapping up for today, if you guys have any suggestions for names on this weird one, let me know. Walsey says Space Wake. Space Wake isn't bad. Edward says Wake Up. Yep, that is also pretty straightforward. We could call it space wake up. This is what astronauts hear when they need to wake up in their space shuttles and spacecrafts. And the real funny thing is, if you really want to give someone anxiety, you just up the BPM like we did earlier. Let me say this. This is the house is on fire. You need to wake up now. No, that stresses me out just hearing it. All right, max BPM on the loop station is 250. That's what I wanted to check. And this is an absolute nightmare at 250 BPM, so we're not going to do that. We'll keep it nice and low tempo. I think I'm gonna combine both Wazzy and Edward's suggestions and call this one Space Wake Up. That'll be part of the archives here, so I can go and dig it up later once we finish working on this one. Let me drop everything down here. So we will go ahead and wrap up for today. I think this was pretty productive. I'm glad people stopped by and brought questions, and in general just sort of threw them at me so I can get used to answering questions about things like beatbox technique and theory. Next time we do one of these, we're going to devote majority of the time to BGM and loop station stuff. That'll be my plan for next time. We'll pick up with this one and the other one that we started a while back and see if we can come up with some more finalized tracks that'll go into the major repository of BGM's tracks to use for upcoming content. Wazzy says, thanks for streaming. Thank you for tuning in, Wazzy, and everybody else that came over. These are fun. I like to do these every other week or so, schedule permitting. It's a good chance to sort of just kick around ideas, and in general, they're a good time. So I'm gonna stop the BGM. I'm gonna go to the outro screen. Let's see who's online to potentially raid. So let's see. We'll go to the Slutty Raku art, as Wazzy calls it. We'll put the outro up. Edward says, I still can't believe Raku is 55. Well, it's a good thing they gave us internet access in the old folks' home, Edward. Alright, let's see who is online. Hey, Beatbox is online. I haven't talked to that guy in forever. Let's go raid Beatbox. Beatbox is the dude that rigged my model. The current rigging on my VTube rabbit. Let's go say what's up to Beatbox. But once again, thanks to everybody for stopping by. We will be getting back together next week once I figure out the stream schedule. So until then, I will see you folks later. Have yourselves a good evening. Let's go raid Beatbox.